Hey, welcome, Esoteric Judaism here. I'm going to do another stream tonight. I guess I'll do, ask the rabbi if people here have questions, but I want to do quite a bit of presentations, might even be a few hours, because I have a lot of information, a lot of power slides. I'm going to be doing the history of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. There's a lot of information on this topic. A lot of people already know a lot about this. Other people might not know that much about it. So, since only one person or no one's watching, I'll jump right in with some slides. So I'm going to enter screen share mode. It can be a lot of presentations, and maybe if more people come, we could add some commentary or even other people to join in and discussing what's going on. And I don't put my earpiece in because it's just me on here, so I got to occasionally check it. Okay, so I've mentioned Henry Abramson a lot, and this is pretty good basic stuff, this concept of his understanding of the history of anti-Semitism. And Henry Abramson's the dean of Touro College, and I studied in Touro College. I've been listening to him for a few years, and he breaks it down into what he'll call ancient xenophobia, where people had hatred of the Jews because we were different, we had different ways, we acted according to different standards, morals, so on and so on, until you have the rise of early Christian anti-Judaism, and you have medieval Jew hatred to the modern form. And you could do a more in-depth one, but this is just a pretty big overview of thousands of years, because obviously the Jewish people have thousands of years of history, and we've been in the center of world politics really our since our inception in Egypt, when Egypt was the most powerful nation. And the Bible says the new Pharaoh rose who didn't remember Joseph, and he saw that the Jewish people were numerous and had a different way, and they feared lest the Jewish people team up with an enemy of Egypt. And so you just basic minority. A lot of this could have applied to any minorities. You have a minority in your nation, and possibly another nation will team up with the minority in your nation to take them down. That's a basic strategy. Doesn't matter whether it's Jews or non-Jews. And this is his presentation. You could check Henry Abramson's page. He's got the early Christian anti-Judaism from the rise of the church, from even the Gospels, the Jewish followers of Christ like Paul, St. Augustine's. We're going to get more into this later. The Jews is kind of blind and mainly focusing on, God forbid, the Jews' rejection of Christ or our inability to accept Christ as our Lord and Savior. And then, but within that, there's a certain theology built upon it, and we might get into St. Augustine a little bit later. And this is still during the Roman period, before the medieval, the rise of Europe. And then medieval Europe, anti-Semitism takes a different form. You have, God forbid, the ritual murder, the complaints that, God forbid, Jews might have ritually murdered Christian children. And this goes back over 1,000 years. Desecration of the host. We'll get into that later, what that is, but that appears quite often through Europe for hundreds of years. This is just a quick overview. And these are nice graphics if people know much European history. And to modern anti-Semitism, which he puts into two elements: racism, which is different than what happened in the previously the modern age, which racism is largely built on Darwinism, and conspiracy theory. And because that's just a quick overview from Henry Abramson. I like Henry Abramson. He's pretty cool. I listened to his lectures on Jewish history, and he's done a lot of research on anti-Semitism. So I wanted to start with his overview. So if no one has any questions in the chat, I'm going to go forward with these PowerPoints. And so let's look at Jews in medieval Europe. Yeah, I found some nice slides. What did Europe look like in the Middle Ages? And you have the remnants of the Holy Roman Empire controlling the large parts of Germany. You have the Kingdom Poland, Hungary, France, Spain, England, the Seljuk Empire, the remnants of the Byzantine Empire, and the Muslims start coming through. We don't have to go too much into European history. Some of it will be discussed in the last one, the exact same picture from Henry Abramson of the ecclesiastic and the Jews who were just kind of seen as blind, because it was kind of a known fact throughout Europe that it was almost impossible to convince a Jew to become a follower of Jesus Christ, even though most of Europe were Christians of the time, and the structure that built up Europe was Christianity. So the Jews were essentially the main other. Some of the doctrine, there's a lot to this. Is just quick stuff I found online. What it was like to be a Jew in Europe. Jews have a basic right to live in Christian society. You're not allowed to commit crimes against Jews. Jews could worship as they wanted, but Jews, they didn't want Jews being subversive and trying to subvert Christian society. Obviously, Jews had a different religion, didn't agree with Christianity, and a lot of periods during Europe it was forbidden for a Christian to convert to Judaism. And they just looked at, kind of like the Jew is blind, so to say, that they just, for whatever reason, the Jews were blind to Christianity. You have Augustine, who first writes about, the nature of the Jews and, legitimizes that Jews should be allowed to exist in Christian society. And they had a certain divine purpose that, the witness, that as a Christian, you wanted the Jews to be there to legitimate the Hebrew prophets. So if you have a Christological interpretation of Jesus Christ and you want proof that your scripture is true, you have these Jews who follow the ancient tradition, the first half of the Bible, the old, accordingly, the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so partially a proof of the New Testament is the fact that there are Jews that still worship the Old Testament, and that will legitimate the prophecies in the New Testament about the coming of Jesus Christ. And that was Christian doctrine. And these slides don't have Joachim, another medieval Christian saint philosopher, trying to understand the roles of Jews in the Christian world. But it made sense that there should be Jews in the Christian world, even though they had, so to say, according to the Christians, rejected their Savior, but at least they brought some sort of legitimacy to the first half of the Bible. And then you have the disputations on what's the correct interpretation of the Hebrew prophets. So the Christians obviously interpreted the Hebrew Bible as the basis for the building up to Jesus Christ, as where the Jews interpret our Hebrew prophets as the basis for our religion. And, theologically, God forbid, the suffering of the Jews was related to our failure to recognize Jesus and possibly our complicitness in the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and that's straight in the Bible. We're punished by destruction of the temple, exile, loss of independence, and the suffering of the Jews was a logical proof to the logicalness of being a Christian. How do you know that Jesus Christ is the Lord and Messiah? And you could point to the failures of the Jews or the suffering of the Jews. And this theology changes, obviously, with the return of Jews to Israel, although it's still debated to today. Anybody who's a Christian is probably largely familiar with this basic theological tenets. And, the concept Jews should be preserved within Christian society so that they'll ultimately repent and recognize the truth, admit our sins, cast off our Jewish heritage, embrace Christianity. So, this was Christian doctrine for a long time. This is a basic St. Augustine that the church was built upon for over 1,500 years now. Slowly in Europe, the number of Jews rises. Maybe in Augustine times, the number of Jews had dwindled. We saw in that other Jewish history, the one I did before, that it could have been down to like 300,000 Jews in the world, only tens of thousands of Jews in Europe. Gradually, that rises up into like 1 million, and before World War II, over 10 million. And so you'll see actual attacks against the Jews, which for a long period of time wasn't that common to actually attack Jews. You just had laws showing the status of Jews. But as the population of Jews and our prevalence rises, there'll actually be violence and attacks. Obviously the Crusades, the First Crusade, Pope Urban II, and maybe a different time we'll talk about the Crusades. The Christians are worried about the influence Jews are having on Christianity, because obviously being Jewish by doctrine is opposed to being Christian. So the more Jews you have, it could be a negative factor on the power of Christianity. And also, possibly that Jews had political power, were intermarrying, and even slaveholding. There's certain evidence that Jews owned slaves in Europe till about 1,000 years ago, and that's a topic for a different discussion. So to say the outlawed Jews from owning European slaves. Third Lateran Council prevents Jews from having Christian servants. Possibly could have had pagan servants, but not Christian servants. So possibly up till the Third Lateran Council that Jews did in fact have Christian slaves, and there is some evidence on this, and it could be the origins of Ashkenazic Jewish or European blood. Could be through this, a topic for a different discussion. So the Jewish badge goes back a long time, medieval Europe, that people should be able to recognize the Jews, so they had certain garments and clothes restrictions, so that Jews would be recognized in public as being different. Fourth Lateran Council, Pope Innocent III, we decree that these Jews shall be distinguishable from other people by the quality of their clothing. So that actually goes into law across large parts of Europe, such as the hat. Then you got, blasphemy against Christians and the coming of the Inquisition. And this is official church doctrine law across large parts of Europe. And God forbid you get the burning of the Talmud, the disputation. We'll maybe talk more about these disputations between Jews and Christians about what's the true religion, Jesus Christ the Messiah. And you got Nicholas Dunnan, who apostate with Yechiel Meperes, and he debates him in public. And that leads to the burning of the Talmud and some expulsion of Jews from that area in France. And there's then the Jewish money lending law, where Christian nations start outlawing lending with interest, but they allow the Jews to be the money lenders at interest due to the basic concept that money lending is a severe sin and could cost a person their soul. But God forbid, the Jews have already lost our souls because we rejected Christ, so they allowed us to be the money lenders in that respect. And sometimes excessive usury. What's in a reasonable amount of usury? How much can you charge? And a topic for a different discussion. But money lending is going to play a huge part in anti-Semitism across Europe, and usury, and it's ingrained in the system within the church law and the laws across Europe for hundreds of years, sometime till the present day. Like in the United States, Jews might be usurious, but there's no special law. Anybody could be a usurer. Anyone could charge interest on a loan. Missionary targets, Christians trying to convert Jews to Christianity, usually unsuccessful. The question of the Talmud, they're saying that why don't Jews convert to Christianity? If their understanding of the Hebrew prophets and the Bible is that it points to Jesus Christ, and it's the Talmud. And so the Talmud starts becoming censored and burned. You have more disputations in Barcelona with the famous one with Nachmanides. In this debate, you could still get the accounts of the church and the Rambam. It was largely held that the Rambam won the debate with the fellow Jew, but you lost the debate in the sense that it led to the exile of the Rambam, and he goes to Israel, and he has a synagogue in Jerusalem. I prayed in that synagogue. Then you have this concept I mentioned, host desecration, and the people who are Catholic probably are familiar with this, where the concept of the wafer representing the body of Christ, and which is first recognized as the Fourth Lateran Council, transubstantiation. And Jews were alleged to believe paradoxically that the wafer was the body of Jesus. Jews were accused of stealing and then stabbing the host and reenacting the crucifixion, which I don't know if there's any truth at all. According to most, this just never happened. It was just a false belief. But for hundreds of years, Christians across Europe feared, and there's art and showing that Jews, God forbid, were stealing these wafers and poking at them, and blood would come out. And you could look up in that history. See art pictures of it. Some of this, God forbid, accusations of this led to Jews being murdered. And you see that there's a lot of art all across Europe of these things, some of them still in churches and castles, and you could look online to see hundreds, thousands of such examples. Then you have blood libels we talked about in the last one. Presumably almost all false. There's possibly a few open cases, a handful of open cases that the Catholic Church has record of. The allegations that Jews murdered non-Jews, especially Christian children, in order to obtain blood for the Passover of other rituals. And God forbid, this also led to pogroms, murders, running Jews out of town. The first one, they say, William of Norwich in 1144, 1475, Simon of Trent, and Pope Paul IV in 1965 said that blood libels were false. It was a fiction, never happened. Expulsions and burnings, God forbid, many times throughout Europe there were expulsions and murders and pogroms. And I don't have a complete history in these, but that's there's more scholarship to get into it. Okay, so I'm just checking the chat now. I have that open. Let me see. Content says Brundle just gave him a timeout. I'm sorry to hear that. That's why I'm more just educational. Like this talk. Let's increase the educational content, and that's why I'm doing just educational presentation. Evening Esoteric, thank you for joining me again. I mean, to do sell suburbia, is all criticism of the Jewish community anti-Semitism? No, not necessarily. I'm saying the Jewish question is a reasonable question to wonder, who are these people? Why are we different? Are we law-abiding good citizens? Is a good question. So I mean, the criticism, xenophobia is possibly rational. There's irrational xenophobia, and then there's hatred that's irrational, and then there's lies. So there's different levels of it. So if you're complaining about usury, if you're complaining about certain Jewish attributes, that could be reasonable, as opposed to false libelous claims that are obviously false or meant to incite things. And I mentioned Jews were welcomed into Christian society in the first place, partially due to St. Augustine's interpretation that was I forget what Lateran Council, but showed that the Jews served a special place in Catholic Europe, where the Jews were necessary as a witness to the Hebrew prophets. And till today, a lot of Christians will say, like, you need Jews for these bearing witness ceremonies. So in small numbers, not only Jews were welcome, Jews were invited into Christian countries, and had certain sections where we lived. And that mentions, as the numbers got bigger and there were large amounts of us, that changed when it was just a handful of Jews as opposed to large amounts of us. So now let's talk about the rise of Eastern European Judaism. Make sure this is still working. Okay, so let's talk about more. Now we get rise of Eastern European Judaism, where you really have the population explosion, as we saw in the chart the other day, where there were really less than 1 million Jews in the whole world for 1,500 years. They say, like, when the Roman destruction, there might have been up to many 5 million Jews, and the Romans really decimated us, and we fell to like less than 1 million, maybe even only a few 100,000. And then in 18th century, all of a sudden, population boom, mostly in Poland, and like 15 million of us. Until today, most Jews come from this European origin of largely what happened in Poland. So let's see some of this. Your early settlement, evidence of Jews in Poland as early as the 11th century. 1264, first charter establishes Jewish autonomy. Jews immigrate seeking better conditions. Charters granted in the 14th and 15th century. Jews are actively invited into Eastern Europe in the 13th century. So there's expulsions in different areas of Europe and moneylenders, and you maybe Jews were, you had moneylenders or knowledge, international people, and were actually invited into Eastern Europe. There's the pogroms and expulsions caused Jews to leave certain areas. Different places in Europe, namely Poland, Eastern Europe, took advantage of the situation and said, Jews, come here. You say Yiddish comes because a lot of the Jews left from the Germanic area. The Jews that came into Poland left from the Germanic area. So this Yiddish becomes the common language of the Jews in Poland. And Ashkenazic means German. In Hebrew, Ashkenaz refers to Germany. So you have German Jews in Poland. Almost all Jews in European are, Sephardi Jews of Spain. Generally, all Jews across anywhere besides Spain are considered German Jews. So by the 16th century, there's already 50,000 Jews in Poland. Pinchas Accord, so you say Poland, the exile is less bitter than any place else. It's the Marshal, it's so good that people forget we were in exile. The Hebrew, the Polin, could mean dwell here. So by 1648, there could be as many as 500,000 Jews in Poland, and the community of Jews in Poland is the largest in the world. So by the 1650, there's more Jews in Poland than any place else in the world. And when we get up to Holocaust, this is going to be significant. Communal structure. Usually you had the Polish nobility owned the land, and they had a certain feudal structure where the Polish nobleman was the lord over large parts of territory, and they would grant a certain lot of alignment to Jews, and those Jews would function as administrators, tax collectors under the Polish nobility, which, God forbid, could have given us a despised position. And the Jews were largely self-governed under that. So that, the Jews were subservient to the local Polish nobility, but the Jewish communities in those areas were largely allowed to be self-governed, which is going to lead to our population explosion. You have the Council of Four Lands in Poland, where these different, the Polish sovereign wealth that connected together different areas. So the Polish Jews also had a similar Council of Four Lands, where the Jews of the different areas had leadership, and they got together and administered. That dissolves in 1764. They serve purposes. They reject Shabbatite speed, Jacob Frank. They supervise book publishing. They run education, tax collection. They defend the communities against anti-Semitism, violence. Jews are largely arranged in commerce, middlemen, shopkeepers, innkeepers, and also tax farmers and moneylenders. And also a lot of Jews are involved in alcoholic beverage production, and say like innkeepers, barkeepers. And management, agriculture products, and that time lumber was the main one. If anyone's familiar with Hasidic stories, a lot of them center around lumber. So there's a symbiotic relationship between the Polish nobility and the Jews. The Jews served as a management class basically for the Polish nobility. They didn't really pose any political risk. We didn't have any army, and we performed a large service to the Polish Empire. And as they generally, Poland invited Jews. Jews continued for hundreds of years from all other places that weren't so friendly to the Jews, came to Poland. And that here you have the rise of the shtetl, these special partitioned Jewish areas where Jews could largely live according to self-rule. And, coming into the Holocaust, this will play very important because there's thousands of these, and some of them have, up to 100,000 Jews in them, that these shtetls, that first start when the Polish nobility invite a handful of Jews in, and over hundreds of years, some of these have tens and tens of thousands of Orthodox Jews living in these countryside areas. In the 1800s, you have the decline of Poland, the rise of France, the rise of cities, and the shtetl starts to decline. A lot of Jews stay in the shtetl up to World War II, but many of the Jews that population explosion in all these shtetls across what at that point had been the Polish Empire move into urban areas. And he's saying, okay, that the head of European rabbinics and Judaism had been in Germany, but at some point it shifts away to the center, largely is in Poland. Some names of some famous rabbis, if anyone knows. Big centers, religious life, Krakow, Lublin, Warsaw, as I said. So you had your towns like Brisk. You had certain towns that had were mostly Jewish shtetls, and then you have Jews moving into the major cities, and you see up until World War II, Jews make up 10, even 25% of some major cities across Europe. Synagogues built, hundreds of synagogues. I have books of hundreds of synagogues. There's hundreds of empty synagogues till today. There were thousands of synagogues that were destroyed. I have a slide presentation on Kristallnacht where over 1,000 synagogues across Germany were destroyed in one day. And a lot of these synagogues are actually, thank God, still in existence today. They're beautiful. Most of them hardly have a congregation. Said the Jews had autonomous rule in this area and allowed us to have a population explosion. Yiddish. So anti-Semitism. So the nobility supported the Jews, but not everyone liked the Jews, obviously. So the Jews had a special protected status, and we performed special functions, and we were largely liked by the nobility for what we did for them. But the guilds, the beginning of the union, a lot of the churches didn't really like us, and there were always accusations of blood libels, and sometimes there was infighting among kings and nobles. They could try to win public support by turning against the Jews, but generally the nobles provided protection. They had these large land allotments and would allow the Jews to live somewhere on their property in a protected status. And then you have the Khmelnytskyi massacre, where Poland's at one point is controlling like half of Europe, and the Ukraine led by Khmelnytskyi, and hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, possibly Jews are slaughtered. These Jews who had been administrators on the Ukrainians who had served under the Polish nobility, and we had been tax farmers and administrators. So when the Ukrainians took over, God forbid, like the armies and the Cossacks and the peasants, they let loose and terrorized the Jews. Some of the Jews were probably guilty of doing bad things, but a lot of the Jews were largely innocent and suffered at the hand of the that war, if people know that history. So from there on, Poland declines, never really rises again to a national power like it had been. Sweden invades Poland, Russia invades Poland. Poland basically, loses territory from all sides. And so these Jews who had prospered under Polish rule, and we had a population explosion. So now these other countries take over Polish territory, and they inherit the Jews with the new territory that they got. And within Poland, that led to the beneficial treatment on Jews. They weren't able to confer such beneficial treatment on Jews, and larger taxes, and the nobles start allowing us less autonomous rule, and so on and so on. Here's a picture of the partition of Poland in 1772. So you'd see the larger area of what had been Greater Poland, and all across those area you had large Jewish settlements where our population really exploded, and there's more Jews in Poland than basically all the rest of the world put together, and so these other countries inherit these Jews. So Germany, Germany didn't exist then, but Prussia, Austria, Russia, Sweden, all these different powers now have larger territories, now have these large Jewish communities, and a lot of these Jewish communities will move from, as they're now citizens or part of that other country, they'll end up migrating to these cities of these new countries that they found themselves part of. And you have, the Russian Empire took the largest amount. So most of the Jews of Russia come from this part. There had been Jews in Russia before, and like I have Simon Dubnow's book on the history of Jews in Russia, and that's a whole topic for another discussion. But Russia basically inherits the Jews from the territory they conquered from Poland, and they get hundreds of thousands of Jews, and they multiply into millions of Jews by time World War II, or by the time the exodus of most of the Jews from Russia to Israel and America in the later half of the 20th century. Use a Russian rule. You have Christian Orthodoxy, which has a different stance and largely more hostile to the Jews than the Catholics or the Northern Europeans. The Russian Orthodox typically were more hostile theologically towards Jews, and you have more harsher conditions under the Russians. Although then you have on the other side, on the Western Europe, you're moving towards Jews' emancipation and becoming full citizens. Because the Jews in Poland, they weren't full citizens; they just had special privilege of protection under the Polish nobility. And then, under France, Austria, Prussia, they're moving towards granting Jews full citizens that will become full Europeans, equal with everybody else, capable of filling any governmental occupational position. You have Catherine II in Russia. She aims to integrate Jews. There's some opposition from the clergy, and there's a certain palace settlement established in 1791 where they try to push Jews into this one section of Russia, and you can see that here on the map if anyone knows European history, where they largely want to encourage Jews to live in this certain area of the empire. And so 90% of the Jews of those former Polish territories that are in Russia are pushed into this area, and anyone knows their Jewish history or knows Jews, like a lot of us come from these towns. Okay, so that's the end of my European slideshow of the generic buildup of European history to the build up to World War II. I'm going to do one more on lead up to the Holocaust. That's going to overview of all of this. So, Deus Ex Suburbia, how much does anti-Semitism contribute to the survival of diaspora? So it's certain like the love-hate relationship among Jews and our host countries has possibly been good and bad for us. That it makes us work harder. These people don't really like you. You take your education seriously. You work hard. So there's certain success factor that is possibly came through our oppression. So now I'm going to go to this overview of Peter Hayes' book, Why Explaining the Holocaust. And so maybe I'll do a quicker one, just a overview of an overview of what happens in the Holocaust. And so this one's just 20 slides and just kind of like what happens, the rise of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, and then we'll get to Peter Hayes, who's going to review a lot of this European history. So, God forbid the Holocaust, World War II, 60 million people killed, 11 million in German death camps, 3.5 of them Russians, 6 million Jews. It's pretty accepted historical. 2/3 of all European Jews, God forbid, are murdered in the Holocaust. Your basic chronology, 1933, Hitler's appointed to Chancellor of Germany. There's almost 600,000 Jews in Europe. 33, the Nazis first opened up the concentration camp at Dachau, followed by Buchenwald. There's the boycott of Jewish businesses in 1933, and the decree defining non-Aryan as anyone descended from non-Aryan, especially Jewish parents or grandparents. Here's a map of some of the concentration and death camps. You notice the death camps are mostly all in Poland. More chronology. Nazis completely take over Germany. They start passing laws for sterilization. 1935, the Nuremberg race laws. Jews are stripped of Germanic citizenship. Notice, like only really like 100 years later, after the fall of Poland, and so the Jews in the western side of Europe start becoming complete full citizens. So really, like 100 years later, we're stripped of citizenship. Confusion. Who is a Jew? Is very complicated. An example of the blood laws. Black represents Jews, white represents German, and so you have different racial laws. Who's a Jew? 1938, Jews need identity cards, demand to show it on spot. Jews are fleeing the St. Louis in 39. We'll talk about this later. 1939, the Jews invade Poland. The Nazis invade Poland. And God forbid, then the 1939, the euthanasia on sick and disabled people begin. The first started murder of unwanteds. 41, the Jews are forced into labor. 42, concentration camps, Auschwitz and Majdanek. And then the end of the war, 45, Soviets finally, the actual Holocaust beginning in 41, the final solution, where God forbid, the Germans decided they had to kill the Jews. And anyone who's familiar, God forbid, with the Holocaust, this should be pretty common. Like, I have a whole shelf of books on the Holocaust. I know large amount of Holocaust survivors. I've heard thousands of hours of stories on this. Yes, unfortunately, whether the 6 million the 6 million figure, it's hard to know. We'll get into some more details where you'll see where those 6 million come from, and that's why the lead up here of the history of Eastern European Jews and the population explosion of Jews in Europe, where we all came from, how there came to be close to 10 million Jews in Eastern Europe at the time. So I'm going to do one more quick overview of the Holocaust, and then I'm going to get to this Peter Hayes, and we'll review this European history. Okay, I just pulled some of these offline from online just to give some slides to it. So the Nazis came to power in 33. They began to isolate the Jews. You have the Havora, the transfer. In 1938, it is the hardest impact. Then Jews are basically separated from society. Identification cards. And until Kristallnacht, and we'll talk about Kristallnacht in 1938, where you have Kristallnacht is really the turning point, where the stripping of citizenship and rights of Jews leads to the rounding up of Jews and God forbid, the eventual murder. And as the Nazis start to conquer territory across Europe, that spreads throughout Europe. Because as we said, there were only about 600,000 Jews in Germany, so relatively most of the Jews who suffer at the hands of the Nazis did not come from Germany. You have Kristallnacht in 1938, which I have a whole slideshow on that, which really is the brink point of switching from economic restrictions and trying to strip Jews of citizenship and right to actual violence. The dots on the map are where cities where synagogues were destroyed. So Kristallnacht in 1938. This is in Germany. There's about 600,000 Jews in Germany. And all across Germany, you have anti-Semitic pogroms, destruction of synagogues, rounding up of Jewish men, taking them for questioning and interrogation, deportation of non-German citizens, Jews who had been in Germany for whatever reason up until that point without full citizenship. Your picture destroyed synagogues, destroyed Jewish businesses. We had hundreds of years in Germany already. We were relatively pretty prosperous, and we had large, beautiful synagogues all across Germany. And I have a whole slideshow just on Kristallnacht. So there's a lot. The testimony of different people. You got the badges. So the Jews aren't the only victims. God forbid, you got the handicapped, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witness, Soviet POWs, Slavic 1.5 million political dissidents were murdered. And eventually, like 41, 42, they start concentrating camps, railing these Jews from across Europe into concentration camps and eventually into death camps. More maps of where these existed, and it's possible that large parts across Europe didn't actually know what was happening. So here's some statistics. Anyone in the chat was asking, Paul, if you're still there. I'm not going to give any opinions now on just more a historical overview. I'm not moralizing or preaching, just Kristallnacht, they started with the Greenwald, Greenspan or whatever. I know the history of that, where a Polish Jew who was was deported from Germany, and then he murdered a German diplomat, and then there was actually a court case in it. It reached all the way. He claimed that he had known the diplomat, that they had a homosexual relationship. It's kind of complicated, that history, but whatever catalyzed the Kristallnacht, there were different factors. But there was some news story, and then it just happened one day. One day, God forbid, the Germans rose up and destroyed synagogues all across Germany and looted, and it was one of the worst days in all of Jewish history. So here we're going to, so let's see some of these numbers. So I'm not sure if you could see this. Here we have the 1941 Jewish population and the estimated number of Jews killed. So obviously Poland, they're saying there's about 3 million Jews in Poland before the war, and almost 90% of those Jews were murdered. Romania, about 1 million Jews. 750,000 murdered. Soviet Union, almost 3 million Jews, a third of them murdered. In other places that, Germany, the Jews, a lot of them got out because, anti-Semitism slowly rose in Germany over a decade. So most, over half of the Jews, so you said there was about 600,000 Jews in Germany after World War I. But by the time World War II is approaching, there's only 250,000 because a lot of, we got out. And we saw it was looking bad. And you have other places like Austria, 60 of 70,000 murdered. Belgium, 28,000 of 85,000. Bulgaria, 40,000 of 48,000. Czechoslovakia, these numbers, Yugoslavia, a lot of countries, God forbid, the majority of the Jews were murdered. Italy, only a small fraction. Denmark, Italy, only a small fraction of the Jews were murdered. So that you get the overview, how did the population of Jews in Europe become so big? And then where did we exist during the war that Germany was able to take over? Like Poland at one point had controlled most of Europe, and that's where the population of Jews exploded, and there became so many of us across Europe, to when Germany in this small period of time takes over large portions of Europe, and destroys most of us. Or God forbid, Auschwitz. Okay, I got some more of this. So just a handful of people watching. Try to keep up with the questions. Yeah, I mean, you could research this on that. I want to give a bigger overview than not put too much attention into single stories. So let's keep moving. Let me just make sure my sound's still good. Okay, so let's go to any of you know Peter Hayes? Peter Hayes' book, Why Explaining the Holocaust. He's a pretty popular Holocaust speaker, and this slideshow is based on his book. So this is according to Peter Hayes. Saying Jews are not a nation, looking at what a nation is compared to the Jews. You might argue with this, and so this is taking the opinion there is no race. The culture. So whatever. Let's get past that, and that's more arguable. So anti-Semitism, like I showed from Henry Abramson, you had pagan anti-Semitism, which you said early xenophobia, where just the Jews refused to bow down to the idols or had different practice, to Christian anti-Semitism, anti-Judaism, which is more theological, and then that turns into after evolution in Nazi Germany, it's largely racial anti-Semitism, which is a different form of your racism and hatred than had existed historically. The racial animosity is basically an invention of the last few hundred years. Precursor. This one has the long view of Jewish history. What do the Jews believe? Pagan anti-Semitism, pagan hostility was aroused by the refusal of the Jews to join in the ecumenical consensus of pagans. Basically, we refused to recognize or bow to their idols. And there was other prejudices against the Jews. And here, I mean, this one is, you could take it more rational than these slides are showing, but just saying you didn't like people because they were different, they had different practices, or didn't conform to the mean. The rise of Jesus Christ in Christianity. Jesus is charged with treason against Rome, claiming to be the Messiah and King of the Jews, brought before Pontius Pilate. The verses in Matthew. And the history of Christian anti-Semitism, Matthew 27:24. They answered all the peoples, his blood be upon us, free Barabbas, crucify Jesus. And this verse was used by the early Christian church leaders to teach that the Jews had placed a curse on themselves. At the same time, the church leaders wrongly allowed Pilate's act of washing his hand to symbolize that all Romans were free from the guilt of what happened to Jesus. Obviously, these slides are slanted and pro-Jewish, but the history is well known. So after the death of Jesus, his ideas of love and understanding between humans were spread by both Jews within the Jewish fold and those who were among the Gentiles to propagate his ideas. The separation between those two groups sharpened when the followers of Jesus claimed that God sent Jesus to the world as the Messiah and that he was not only God's messenger, but God himself in human form. Within a short time, these non-conforming Jews formed a majority, and by 70 CE, new religion, Christianity, had emerged. In less than 400 years, Christianity went from being a persecuted branch of Judaism to being the dominant religion of the Roman Empire. This is worthy of more talk, but tonight we're focusing on the Holocaust and the rise of anti-Semitism. The New Testament becomes the book, the Gospels of Jesus Christ, becomes the official doctrine of Christianity that includes possibly some anti-Jewish statements. Christians believed in monotheism. Okay, but we don't have to get too much on stay on the focus of anti-Semitism for this lecture. So many Christians blamed the death of Jesus on the Jewish authorities who had turned him over to Pontius Pilate, and that eventually turned into just believing that the Jews had rejected and killed Christ. And this is even hinted to it already in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And for that, God forbid that the Jews altogether should be persecuted. And it's not until the Second Vatican Council, Nostra Aetate in 1965, that Pope John Paul II and the Catholic Church officially exonerate most of the Jesus Jewish contemporaries and all subsequent Jews of the charge of killing Jesus the Christ. Constantine the Great, the Edict of Milan, 313. Freedom of worship was granted to all in the Roman Empire, regardless of the deity. In 337, the church had the power to enforce its anti-Jewish rhetoric. And slowly, the whole your Roman Empire converts to Christianity, and Jews find ourselves under Christian rule. So you have the Justinian Code, Byzantine Empire Justin, and he had anti-Jewish regulations written into the Roman Code of Law. Jews were degraded to second-class citizen, could not build synagogues, read Hebrew, gather in public places, celebrate Passover before Easter, or testify against Christians in court. Most Europeans adopted the Justinian Code. In the Middle Ages, Jews were citizens, but treated as resident foreigners. So largely in Europe, like Augustine, Jews were allowed to be partial citizens as resident foreigners across Europe. They had protection of the king, needed permits to live and work in a town, a privilege for which they had to pay the prince, bishop, or town magistrate, as we saw in the history of Poland. So hence the Jews were pretty vulnerable to the king's whims, including at times to expulsions, because we were resident foreigners. If the king grew tired of us or came into dispute, or for whatever reason decided to turn against the Jews, that led to many frequent expulsions across Europe. Crusades, 1096 to 1291. A lot of times, God forbid, that was some of the biggest slaughters of Jews, especially relative to the population. There's less than 1 million Jews in the world at that time, and the 12,000 Jews estimated killed in the first 7 months of the crusade. That could have been as much as a fourth to a third of the Jewish population in Germany and France that were slaughtered during the First Crusades. Jews excluded from the guilds, crafts. Jews can't be part of the union. We're basically trapped into certain trading and money lending professions and excluded from the guilds. So we end up as peddlers and the wandering Jew, or middlemen, going one place, buying and selling in another, or the aristocrats among the Jews or money lenders. So up until the 15th century, the church had completely forbid Christians from lending at interest. And as the need for credit expanded, feudal lords were willing to keep their money lenders from harm's way. The Jews became the money lenders, although most Jews weren't money lenders. Obviously, you had to be a wealthy Jew to be a money lender, and hence, the history of the idea of usury and the connection between usury and Judaism. As we're in America, anybody could be a usurer. In Europe, only Jews could be usurers. And we discussed this before, the Pope Innocent III and the Fourth Lateran Council, a ruling that Jews had to have special marking on their clothing. And hence, you're going to see why when Poland offers refuge to the Jews, why Jews from all across Europe flee to Poland. Jews, we get blamed for a lot of things, the plague and different things. It's common to scapegoat and blame the Jews for different problems, and many times that could lead to, God forbid, violence and even murder. And our only resource was really to pay money to the European armies to protect us, stick together, keep a low profile. Still, strategy is very common till today, of just being a minority. Desecration of the host. So the creation of the sacrament of the wafer and the wine, and taboo of the Jews, and this concept of desecration of the host becomes very popular across Europe, as we discussed before. God forbid the ritual murder accusations that, as we saw even on my first Ask the Rabbi, that are still popular till today. Black Death, poisoning of the wells, blaming the Jews for poisoning the wells. Book burnings, forceful conversions to Christianity. This is already much later, using the 1800s. Nicholas I introduces 25-year military service for Jews, and at the same time, the case of Edgar Montera, who I think Steven Spielberg is supposed to be making a movie of that or whatever, where the different cases, the Inquisition in Spain, expulsions, over 100 some expulsions. You can see some time frames. England 1290, different places. As Jews leave to the New World, to the Ottoman Empire, to Turkey, but mostly Jews find a refuge in Poland. First Jewish ghettos in Venice, 1516, walled areas within the city. All Jews were to be enclosed in ghettos. Each community could have only one synagogue. All commercial and civil rights were taken away, and all Jews had to wear identification marks. There had been institutions of this since 1215, but this is the first time it was regulated into law. So here's a comparison of anti-Jewish measures in Europe to anti-Jewish measures under Nazi Germany. 306, the Synod of Elvira, church forbids marriage of Jews and Christians, which is comparable to the German Blood and Honor Act in 1935. 306, church forbids Christians from eating with Jews. 1939 in Germany, similar laws passed. 535, Jews not allowed to hold public office. 1933, the law for reestablishment of the professional civil service, Jews are barred from civil service. 538, Jews not allowed to employ Christian servants. 1935, law protection of German blood and honor, Jews are not allowed to employ German servant under 45. 538, Jews not permitted to show themselves in the street during Passion Week. 1938, Jews barred from streets on certain days such as Nazi holidays. 681, burning of the Talmud and other books. 1933, the Nazis publicly burned Talmud and other Jewish books. 692, Christians not allowed to use Jewish doctors. 1938, Christians not allowed to use Jewish doctors. 1215, Church orders Jews to wear special badges. 1941, Germany orders Jews to wear yellow stars. 1267, Church decrees that Jews must live in special Jewish section or ghetto. 1939, Reinhard Heydrich orders the creation of ghettos in Poland. 1322, Pope John XII, 22nd, orders copies of the Talmud burned on Passover Eve. So, you have a lot of comparisons between what happened, really spread out over 1,000 years in Europe, and it's repeated within 10 years in Germany. 14th century German state declares the property of Jews slain in a German city become public property. The Reich citizenship law, property of a dead Jew becomes property of the state. 1412, Jewish districts of Spain are enclosed. 1940, the first ghetto established in Lodz, Poland. 1434, Jews not permitted to obtain academic degrees. 1933, law against overcrowding German schools and university. 17th century Germany, state declared Jewish houses to be marked. 1942, Jewish apartments were to be marked. 18th and 19th century France and Germany, Jews forced to carry documents marking them as Jews. Same thing in 1938. 1267, church decrees that Jews must live in a special Jewish section or ghetto. Same 1939. So just a quick comparison of things that happened over Jews over a 1,000-year period, slammed into 10 years, repeats itself in Germany. So further on the rise of anti-Semitism, Protestant reformer Martin Luther, He writes the famous 1543 on the Jews and their lies. Jews were poisoners, ritual murderers, parasites. He preached, and they should be expelled from Germany for all time. Synagogues should be burned to the ground, and all Jewish books should be seized. Then you have the Enlightenment and the French Revolution, which largely gives full citizenship and rights and emancipation to Jews. And that's where you say that we saw earlier that after the breakdown of the Polish Empire, that these Jews re-enter Eastern Europe, which we'd largely been expelled from or had very small numbers, and are given full rights of citizenship and complete economic, political opportunity to fulfill any role in society, like in America today. The new religion, atheism, equality, universal humanism, freedom of worship. You can see the areas that were emancipated. These areas that he had huge amounts of Jews that were taken over by Napoleon. In those areas, Jews are largely given full citizenship. So 19th century trends in European society. Six-fold increase in Jewish population from like 1,000 plus years where there being less than 1 million Jews. It booms to over 10 million, starting to like doubling from 16 to 1700 and doubling again. And, by the end of the 19th century, there's like 10 million Jews. Industrialization, urbanization, transportation, rail and shipping, democratization, secularization. Jews were the largest beneficiary of these changes. You look at statistics, Austria, Hungary, Persia, the percent of Jews versus university students. Hungary, 5% of the population are Jews. We make up 25% of university students. Prussia, 1%, 5-to-1 difference. And here look in Vienna, Austria, Vienna, where there are a lot of Jews. They say like 25% of Vienna was Jewish. We make up 62% of the lawyers, 50% of the doctors, 45% of the medical faculty, 55% of journalists, 70% of board of stock exchange, 40% of bank directors. 31% of the wealthiest families in Germany were Jews, even though we were less than 1% of the population. Similar, in America and Canada, possibly today. So your reaction to the Enlightenment. So not everyone bought into the Enlightenment and the equality of all people and emancipation and freedom. And there's a pushback, the rise in nationalism. Germans defeat the French, and you have the creation of the Germany, Otto von Bismarck, new rules, and there's a little bit of a pushback upon the Enlightenment and emancipation that had happened in France, and you have the rise of nationalism all across Europe. They say, Poland for the Poles, German for the German, France for the French, as opposed to this more universal character that was supposed to happen under Napoleon, where we might have like this borderless society of everyone being equal, universal humanism. 1873 is the first time the term anti-Semitism is used. It's largely a misnomer because shame from the Bible refers to all the Semitic peoples, Arabic peoples. And with like I discussed with JF and the rise of evolution and racial understandings. So Jews were understood to be mixed racial people. And previously Jews it was because of our religion, and they wanted us to convert. And then after comes this racial thing where there's a racial identity to a Jew, whether we're followed the Jewish religion or not. Because obviously before the emancipation from Napoleon, most Jews were religious. Most Jews lived under Jewish autonomous rule, and the ruler of the Jews were the rabbis. So after the emancipation, Jews largely on our own accord and wanting to dump our religious tradition and want to become full citizens and part of the European Enlightenment. And that leads to this concept of racial hatred of Jews, not a religious hatred of Jews, corresponding also with the rise of new European science in evolution specifically. So, I mean, God forbid, Jews can't be changed. They need to be contained, deported, or eliminated. And, you have your Darwin, Galton, eugenics, racial hygiene, physiognomy, phrenology, Gabinu and his racial differences and stuff, very popular among the alt-right today, philology. You have the Dreyfus affair, where high-ranking French official Dreyfus is falsely accused and convicting of passing on military secrets. He's not loyal to the French people because he's a Jew, and it turns out to be false. And famously, Herzl was a reporter on that, and he had been there reporting on that affair, and that's what convinces him to be a Zionist. Here Herzl's the next slide. So this rise in nationalism leads to increasing distrust of Jews. This personification, of like the happy merchant memes or whatever, of trying to look at Jew as stereotypical Jew. And even, God forbid, Jews as less than human. The refutation and decline of the French Enlightenment and universal humanism principles to rising nationalism. Protocols of the Elders of Zion, 1905. The rise of a conspiracy theory, not only racism, but now conspiracy theory that Jews are subverting society. And here, the Pope's Vatican Council, 1965, Avram Yeshua Heschel, famous rabbi, marched with Dr. King, where the reversal of close to 2,000 years of Christian anti-Semitism. Okay. So it was a little bit long. There's a lot more to do. I hope a few people are enjoying this. I think this is pretty important, and to some extent, I'm doing this largely for my own review or just to put it out there on my page. And some of you are watching. I'm glad you're watching. And there's only a handful of comments in the chat. How much does a Christian apathy towards Judaism was the result of persecution of early Christian Jews by the Jewish authorities? I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, there's no direct evidence. You could make arguments for that, but it's hard to make any direct correlation. Okay, one second. My phone's ringing. Hello? Yeah, I'm streaming now. Did you get trees?
I wasn't able. People are just.
Can you just text me? Yeah, I'm streaming right now. Okay, sorry to take a phone break. And so I got 5 more presentations. So let's look at another smaller one on the Holocaust. And I got some, larger ones, and Kristallnacht in America during the Holocaust. So a lot of this stuff we've, seen already many times. So I'm covering this with multiple slides that will repeat the information. Use the French Revolution, the dilution of Orthodox Judaism, traditional Judaism. Jewish intellectuals join Christian thinkers in studying socialist ideas that grow out of the French Revolution, like Marx, entering the mainstream business in France, Britain, Germany, and elsewhere. And here, we briefly discussed, it's probably why I included this slide, to have a few things in here. So Arthur de Gabineau, a French aristocrat, argued in 1850s that racial differences determine the progress of peoples, and the history showed that all civilizations derive from the white race. He believed that the purest members of his white race were those of Aryan blood, mostly Western Europeans. Gabanu was not especially prejudiced against Jews, but he widely distributed essay on racial inequality, and his core belief in the superiority of Aryan blood would influence many others. You maybe could give in a comparison to like Jared Taylor today. 1871, Germany became a unified nation. A new nationalist fever, coupled with additional strains as the young nation struggled to balance rapid industrial growth, social change, and traditional ways, led to an increase in social stress and class divisions. Historian Heinrich Trices wrote a long essay in 1879 in which he claimed that the fundamental difference between German Jews and Christians could not be reconciled, and that the Jews had usurped too large a place in our life. Nietzsche basically says the same thing. So you have the Treaty of Versailles in after World War I, and here you have Hitler in the crowd in 1914. The German Jews, relatively most of the Jews lived in Eastern Europe, although 1% of the German population was Jewish. Civil rights secured to all Jews by the Weimar government made Germany an attractive country, but anti-Semitic groups flourished after 1919, including the National Socialist German Worker Party, the Nazis. Relatively at the time, the Jews who had made it into Germany were full citizens and were flourishing. And so here you have largely Eastern European Jews that are traditional, as opposed to the assimilated Jews in Germany and France who had been given full rights and privileges and mostly left our older traditions. So Nazi ideology has a strong stream of anti-Semitism, anti-communism, and German racial superiority. Houston Stewart Chamberlain, Englishman married to Richard Wagner's daughter, believed Germans could dominate Europe, but warned that greedy and immoral Jews could block German expansions. He warned that pure Germans that could not come lords of the world unless they first stopped the Jews. He reiterated his views with more force during World War I. Hitler is known to have read his works and made Wagner the semi-official musician of Nazism. We discussed earlier the burning of books, trying to wipe out Jewish ideas from German civilization. You have the race experts, the Der Strömer, the law of restoration of the professional civil service, which you mentioned earlier, comparing it to earlier acts in Europe over periods of thousands of years, the law for the prevention of progeny of hereditary disease, which racial hygiene, the opening of Dachau, 1933. Ministry of Education and Culture undertook the program of Gleichgeschaltet, coordinating state and society. All press and news were controlled by the national government. Neighborhoods were organized by reliable party coordinators, and education was reorganized. Every student was to be taught Rassenkunde, racial science, which emphasized Nazi ideals of Aryan supremacy, and the inferiority of non-Aryans. Nuremberg laws, 1935, strictly prohibited Jewish, non-Jewish relations. Himmler's SS, the core of Aryan thought, now debated the questioning of Michelin children, those born to one Jewish and one non-Jewish parent. Some Michelin were projected by Hermann Göring and other prominent Nazis throughout the area. The boycott, 1933. From 33 to 38, 150,000 to 200,000 Jews leave. In 1938, the Evian Conference. And actually, from what I understand, there were two half Jews that were, up until that point, part of the Nazi Party and part of the Evian Conference. U.S. Immigration restriction in since 1924. We're going to go over the U.S. I have slides on that. Annexation of Austria. The Jews in Austria become part of Germany now. Hitler's desire to also annex parts of Poland or all of Poland. We mentioned earlier Herschel Greenspan killed someone in the chat had mentioned the name of the Nazi official, and that precipitates Kristallnacht. Poland's population is here saying 3.5 million Jews, mostly Orthodox. God forbid, Jewish intellectuals, gypsies were shot by the Einsatzgruppen, the special units that went through the cities, gathered up the Jews, and God forbid shot us and buried us in shallow graves. Some say as many as 1.5 million people were killed like that during the period of time that the Germans were conquering European territory. Poland lost about 1/5 of its population, 3 million Jews, 3 million Catholic Poles and Ukrainian, several thousand Romani gypsies. In 1942, Heydrich, Eichmann, organization of the concentration death camps. Construction of these special death camps, killing facilities, creation of Cyclone B, Mengele, the doctor, experimenter, German rocket science. At the same time, the increase of German war machine and the ability for their war efforts to keep pushing forward, and other European nations basically being unable to stop the advance of Germany militarily from conquering large parts of Europe. Possible plans to bomb Auschwitz. People knew what was happening. You look at the deaths, 25% of the people killed in the Holocaust were Polish Jews. Soviet prisoners of war, 20%. Ethnic Poles, Ukrainians, 22%. Politicians, 10%. And then you have your different Romanian Jews, Czechoslovakian Jews, Hungarian Jews, German Jews, other Jews, Soviet Jews. Nuremberg trials, the capture of Eichmann, tried in Israel. So okay, so I got 4 more slideshows. Okay, I'm gonna keep this going. Just want to get this information out there. So let's look at Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht, this is the change from the stripping of German Jews of our citizenship and rights to, from what we had been full equal citizenship, and we saw that Jews had been very powerful. 31% of the wealthiest families in Germany were Jews, and 1%, making the doctors, lawyers, professionals, and slowly from 1933 till 38, the stripping of rights, to 1938 to the Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht means Night of the Broken Glass. Somewhat like a pogrom. We had this picture before, dots representing places where synagogues were destroyed. So, possibly these have been in plans for a long time. People have wanted to do it. There have been plans to do it. It needed some sort of catalyst to do it. The Herschel Greenspan's murder of the German officer is largely thought to be what led up to it. You could see that Jews were leaving Germany in mass from 33 to 38. Tens of thousands of Jews were leaving each year. Jewish businesses had been taken over already and switched to German control. There had already been a lot of violence. Before then, the boycott of Jewish stops had started in 33. Deportation of Polish Jews, which Herschel Greenspan was one of, that happened very shortly before Kristallnacht. So all the Polish Jews in Germany were forced to leave. So the Greenspan family deported, and the shooting of Ernest van Raff. Herschel Greenspan is a young man. Ernest van Raff, German diplomat in Paris. The German spin, international Jewry, is conspired to have Ernest van Raff killed in order to intimidate Germany and sabotage any chance for the reestablishment of French-German relationships. Riots erupt. November 8th, Nazi commemoration of the beer hall putsch. Hitler delivered a speech in the Bergenbrückler in Munich in November 9th, 1923. So the Nazis were commemorating that 15 years later. Retraced the route of Hitler's movement 15 years earlier to honor the 16 Nazi martyrs who fell during the putsch, to commemorate the victory of the Nazi movement over its adversaries. So Ernest van Raff eventually dies of his wounds. I guess he had been shot, but he hadn't succumbed to his wounds yet. And so Hitler is attending a celebrated event at Old Town Hall. He leaves early, reflecting a desire to distance himself from the violence that had just authorized in his conversation with Goebbels. Goebbels, 9:30 to 10 p.m., addresses Nazi officials. Jewish businesses were to be destroyed and synagogues set ablaze. The police were not to interfere, and fire departments were to intervene only to protect Aryan property. Looting was to be prevented. Weapons were to be confiscated from Jews. It's written in Goebbels' diary. Heinrich Himmler notified, 11:30. Midnight swearing in at the Odenspalt of new SSS recruits. There's a picture of like a midnight swearing in of SS recruits. Heinrich Müller, the sending out of the telex to people about the plans for Kristallnacht. The arrest of 20 to 30,000 Jews throughout the Reich. Severe measures against Jews found with weapons. People in gun rights constantly mention that. The confiscation of Jewish weapons. Heydrich. So this is all night affair. Like that. The chain of events, one thing leading to the other. So this, happening at night. This chain of affairs. 1:40 in the morning. Goebbels is still sending out these messages. And the troops, are getting ready to carry out Kristallnacht. Youths, bystanders, looters, 267 synagogues torched, 76 destroyed completely. God forbid, there's a lot of pictures, documentary evidence of these synagogues being destroyed. 1938. $75,000, 7,500 businesses were destroyed or vandalized. And you see the police were ordered to not interfere. Israel's department store, established 1815, first Jewish-owned shop in Berlin, boycott in 1933. 1938 is destroyed. Fire departments, is that the fire departments were supposed to protect Aryan property but allow the Jewish property to burn. Eyewitnesses accounts, there's a lot of evidence, a lot of eyewitness accounts to this. Acts of resistance. Kaiser Wilhelm, a few synagogues were saved. Different, here you have the the new synagogue at 1880s was allowed, they allowed the fire department to put it out even though they weren't supposed to. Police Lieutenant Wilhelm Creutzfeldt broke the Nazi orders and allowed the fire department to put out the fire of the synagogue. 91 Jews killed, between 2,000 and 2,500 died in the following weeks. A lot of eyewitness accounts. Towns, town that only had 7,000 people, 53 Jews, their synagogue burned. Other crimes against Jews, made to stand in their pajamas and sing obscene songs in front of burning synagogues, march barefoot in their pajamas across a broken glass littered on ground, play football with Jewish prayer books while Jews were made to look on, forced to throw their own furniture and other possessions out the window of their homes and made to carry everything back upstairs, forced to march through the streets and clad in prayer shawls and shredded Torah parchments. Jewish men and women were dragged out of their homes in the middle of the night and forced to watch their synagogue burn. They were made to stand before the burning building for hours. One Jew was forced to kneel before the burning building in order to be photographed. 30,000 Jews, about 10% of the population of Jews in the area, arrested, mostly adult men. A lot of those Jews were sent to concentration camps. A lot of them got out after a few weeks or a few months, but the 30,000 Jews you sent to Dachau, Buchenwald, or Sachsenhausen. Hitler was relatively laying low then. Goebbels, later that day, the justifiable and understandable outrage of the German people against the cowardly Jewish assassination of a German diplomat in Paris vented itself out on a large scale last night. In numerous cities and towns of the Reich, measures of retribution were taken against Jewish buildings and businesses. A strict order is now being issued to the entire population to cease from all further demonstrations and actions against Jewry, regardless of what type. The definitive response to the Jewish assassination in Paris will be delivered to Jewry via the route of legislation and edicts. The spin of the government-controlled press, understandable outrage, no mention of the role that the Nazi Party played in orchestrating it. Editors were expected to obfuscate the systematic nature of the pogrom by noting that windows were smashed here and there. In some places, synagogues ignited themselves or had gone up in flames for other reasons. Focus on local events and avoiding suggestions that an operation had taken place on a Reich-wide scale. Not to be large or prominent, relegated to page 2 or 3. No headlines, no pictures related to the violence. The international press, insurance industry. Insurance companies would be allowed to honor claims from their policyholders, but then they would be reimbursed for this huge expenditure by the government. The state would pass this expense on to the Jews. The Jews are assessed for the damages. The Jews were blamed for what happened. Insurance companies honored their claims to the policyholders, and the Jews had to pay damage for anything that happened to non-Jews. Jewish store owners had to repay for their own repair. And $1 billion Reichmarks, about 400 million at the time in 1938, was opposed as a fine upon the Jews for what happened on Kristallnacht. Four stormtroopers were expelled for having raped or molested Jewish girls during the pogrom. Majority of the people invested got off completely. Only a tiny few were ever put on trial. Greenspan's interesting character, as he gets transferred to Germany. He's indicted for high treason and murder. It's supposed to be broadcast publicly on the radio. Obstacle emerges. Greenspan told the Gestapo interrogator that the shooting in Paris had actually been related to a homosexual liaison that he had had with Ernest Ben Raff. Plans for the trial were placed on hold. Greenspan probably is executed, but later people claim that he turns up after the war. So it's an interesting fate that happens to him. The Nazis wanted to make a big deal about his public trial, and he somehow saves himself by claiming that he had known Van Rath and he didn't kill him due to being expelled from Poland, but because they were homosexual lovers. So that's your big turning point, 1938, that really is the catalyst to the Holocaust and the switching of legal measures and business measures to decrease the rights of the Jews in Germany, reappropriate the Jewish wealth, decline of rights to actual violence. Roosevelt says that week, I myself could scarcely believe that things could occur in a 20th century civilization. And, so President Roosevelt recalls the U.S. ambassador to Germany. Okay, you're going kind of long, only a handful of people watching, but, I'm just going to document this, put this on the stream. Okay, so tells me there's 4 people watching, no one's in the chat, but I got 3 more slideshows. So let's look at one example of one city, Bialystok, which, just a town in Poland, the rise and fall of Bialystok. Bialystok had a large Jewish population. I used to pray on the Lower East Side of the Bialystok Shul that was opened up before the war, almost 100, like before World War I even. And till today, a lot of prominent Jews came from Bialystok, and there had actually been armed resistance in Bialystok. So you got Bialystok on the map of Poland, pre-World War II, Jewish quarter. Bialystok's founded in 1320. Jews settled in Bialystok in 1658. 59, it's the Polish king bequeaths the village to a Polish nobleman. 1764, the first great synagogue is built in Bialystok. Great synagogue, restoration. You can see how big and prominent it was. 1765, there were 765 Jews in Bialystok. Jews were granted equal rights, however, they're forbidden to have agricultural land. Mostly importers, exporters, textiles. By 1867, half of the factories in Bialystok were owned by Jews. 89% of Bialystok's businessmen and 65% of the industrialists were Jews. You see the statistics in 1938, there was up to 60,000 Jews. So you see the population increase from 1765 of Jews to 10,000 by 1856, where Jews made up over half of the people in Bialystok, to 1938, 60,000 Jews of about 130,000 people. After the war, there's only 100,000 people left. I mean, only 1,000 people left. Germans invade Bialystok September 15th, 1939. Shortly after the outbreak of World War II, Bialystok's transferred to the Soviets September 22nd. It's in that territory of a dispute between Russia and Germany. When Germans invade the Soviet Union in 1941, they recapture Bialystok. At that point, there's about 50,000 Jews there. So you got plunder, God forbid, search and murder. A lot of facts. There's a lot of information, known names. Burning of the synagogue. Police station to prevent anyone from stopping it. Could be at that point 500 to 700 people, killed on the spot. Initial pogroms, thousands of people murdered. Sometimes marched out of town, buried in shallow graves.
Hold on for a second.
Okay, 1 second. 1 second break. Okay. So, synagogue burns during Kristallnacht 1938. After the Germans occupied Bialystok in 1941, June 29, military commander summoned Bialystok's chief rabbi, Rosenman, ordering them to form a Judenrat. Initially formed 12 members, all public officials, all public figures. A month later, they form a ghetto, and all the Jews are required to enter the ghetto. Sorry, just make sure this is working. Okay, so I guess some more people are wandering in. Been going on for a while, and so now I'm dealing with just a specific town, Bialystok, prominent Jewish town, in what happened during the war. And saying like the Germans had temporarily conquered in 39, then the Russians took over, and in 41 the Germans reconquer it, and they order the Jews to form a Judenrat in the ghetto, and the Jews are forced into the ghetto. Then the plan to liquidate the ghetto. You got a Jewish labor battalion that are ordered to demolish all of the Lenin and Stalin monuments in Bialystok. The Eisengruppen we'd mentioned earlier, the German military troops come in, and God forbid, you can see what happens. So we discussed this in previous. The Reinhard Heydrich operated the SS, and they're special recruited of intelligence officers, special units and battalions that basically come in and clean out the Jews. So you have the famous massacre. They say 5,000 Jews are marched out of the city and basically killed, buried in shallow graves. There's even pictures, might even be videos of this. You see it happens over a very short period of time. They arrive on July 4th. By July 3rd, 300 of the intelligentsia are taken out and killed. In July 8th, Himmler and Eichmann visit Bialystok, and by July 12th, 2,000 to 5,000 men are killed by the Eastern Commando, and largely the forest, forced to march into dig their own graves, put into shallow graves, shot to death, buried, dirt put over them, and the next wave came in one after the next. There's actually lots of pictures and even videos of some of this. Very well documented. People want to read through some of this, they can. It's a memorial in the Pietrowicz forest. The ghetto is closed, so you had the few thousand Jews are killed, marched out. The leaders or people that refused to go into the ghetto, they're marched out into the forest and shot and killed, and the rest are forced into the ghetto. In the August 1st, so the shooting is like 3 weeks before that, and by August 1st, the ghetto is completely surrounded, can't get out. There's rivers, surrounded by a wooden fence, forced labor. Judenrat were forced to give the Nazis from the Jews in the ghetto laborers to work in different things. And then September 18th to October 28th, they start the mass transfer to Pruzhny. And so, Jews are starting to be deported from the ghetto to the concentration camps, God forbid the death camps, and underground resistance fighters starts. A lot of to Jews, a lot of these people are well known and famous. Mordechai Tenenbaum and Chairman Baratz, and they decide to form an armed resistance. And it doesn't go so well. They put up a little bit of a fight, but it doesn't last so well. 900 Jews are shot, killed during the resistance. 10,000 deported to Treblinka and Auschwitz. Almost all of the Jews in the ghetto are liquidated and killed. The ghetto uprising, 1943. Himmler orders the immediate liquidation of the ghetto. Can't rely on the local German authorities. He has special staff, and people who know their war history. Maybe they know who these people are. August 15th, the ghetto surrounded. August 16th, the Germans enter the ghetto. There's about 200 insurgents with 25 rifles and 100 pistols. German fighters tried but failed to breach the German defenses. About 150 combatants managed to break through and run to the forest, where they joined partisan groups. Eventually ran out of occupation. By the end of the first day, most of the 200 fighters had already been killed. They were able to hold out for 5 days. 72 were able to hide somewhere, but they were discovered. They were all dragged out, lined, and shot. Then deportations begin. 40,000 of the Jews that had been left of the 60,000 originally are deported to Treblinka and Majdanek. About 2,000 Jews are left. And after a few weeks, they're also liquidated and put to concentration camps. There's the Warsaw uprising is the largest uprising of the Jews against the Nazis. This Bialystok uprising is the second largest. Some people survived. The handful of Jews survived that. In August 1944, Bialystok is liberated by the Soviets, and of the 60,000 Jews that had been there before the war, there's about 300 or 400 left. Okay, so I got two more presentations, one long one on the whole, German history of the Holocaust. I'd done some briefer ones, and the history of Europe, rise of anti-Semitism, where did all these Jews come from, and now we're gonna have a big overview, basically the whole thing. I got one other one on America in the war. So yeah, I'm not really publicizing it. Like I covered a lot of this history you're putting here, and so this is more just historical lessons. You could draw conclusions how you see fit. Obviously as a Jew, like I was taught about these things, I learned about these things, I've thought about these things. Maybe non-Jews have learned about these things. Those lessons could be learned. If God forbid, I'll let you draw your own conclusions to it. God forbid, like I'm a Jew, I came from German background. This is important history. I wanted to put it out there, have it on my channel, and I'm not moralizing or anything. So here, pretty long. This one's got almost 400 slides. The Holocaust. Professor, Queens College, Alan Rosenberg. Go through some of these quickly. The Greek word, what does it mean? Holocaust actually comes from the Hebrew Bible. It means a burnt offering, and there's certain Christian understandings why it's referred to as the Holocaust, or even Jewish understandings. The uniqueness of the Holocaust, just the pure number of murders, close to 10 million Jews killed a day. Everybody from, not just the poor peasants, the Yiddish-speaking peasants on the countryside, but doctors, lawyers, millionaires, businessmen. Didn't matter the success level or the importance. It was all Jews. You get here a map. How many years people had been living in Europe. Italy, 2,100 years, Jews had been there. Poland, 800 years. Germany, there had been Jews for over 1,600 years in Germany. France, almost 2,000 years. Romania, there have been Jews that had a long period of time in Europe. As to the population explosion, during most of that time, there was less than 1 million Jews and sometimes only a few 100,000. And then the 1700s, population started exploding with the Polish setting up extremely nice amenities for Jews, and by the end of the 19th century, there's over 10 million Jews in Europe. So here's a map. Just saying how many Jews were in Europe before the war, after the war, how many Jews were in America. Jewish life before the war. And say, majority of the people killed, God forbid, were basically innocent bystanders. You blame like whatever Jews might have been disliked or whatever. Most of them didn't really have anything to do with anything. Most of them were basically innocent bystanders. And obviously Jews weren't the only ones that were killed. Freemasons, Jehovah's Witness, handicapped, homosexuals, African Germans. You lead to, the process of identification, exclusion, confiscation, ghettoization, deportation, to extermination. You get who was Hitler? A brief biography of Hitler. Born in Austria. So here I know the Hitler's family tree. There's some question about it. There's some people claim that Hitler had a Jewish grandfather. Very few reputable historians think that Hitler was part Jewish. That was even brought up during the Nuremberg trials. Hans Frick declared that Johann Heidler was not the father of Hitler, and there was this guy Frankenberger who was there, who impregnated Hitler's mother, and it was looked into. This guy Frankenberger, there's no records that he ever existed. But there's interesting that Hitler's family tree is unknown, it's unclear, and until today there is still conspiracy theories that believe that Hitler was part Jewish. Raised Catholic at the time, the majority of people were. Church, St. Michael's Catholic Church. Aspired to be an artist, rejected by the Vienna Academy of Arts on 2 occasions. Some paintings that he did. Largely, he writes himself, he wasn't anti-Semitic as a kid. Grows to be an anti-Semite when, as a young man, he goes to Vienna, and then later, World War I, and he writes about that largely in Mein Kampf, of how he turns against the Jews from what he finds in Vienna. And we discussed Vienna at the time had at least 10% Jews, and the Jews were very powerful all across culture in Vienna. The statistics on the other page. He moves to Germany to avoid the Austrian draft and fights for Germany during World War I, and he's blinded in the war. Okay, so contributions to the rise of the Nazis, the treaties of Versailles, economics, nationalism, anti-Semitism. After World War I, France creates a buffer zone in between Russia and Germany, and there's a carving out of Europe, and there's swift economic sanctions and a bunch of rules placed on Germany for punishment for supposedly starting World War I or losing World War I. You see the partition maps. German loses a bunch of territory. So after World War I, large parts of Germany are carved up, and the rise of the Nazis will largely come to try to reclaim this territory. Economics, huge unemployment, inflation, the worldwide depression of 1929. Here you got unemployment figures in 6 million Germans unemployed, and the rise in National Socialism will basically get rid of the unemployment crisis. The inflation, you see the numbers here, the German marks, 4.2 to US dollar to 4.2 trillion in 1923. Money basically, the German mark basically becomes worthless. The Depression of 29, Wall Street crash, and the rise of German nationalism. We had already seen the pushback from the French Enlightenment, the victories of Napoleon, the decline of the Polish Empire, and the giving of full citizenship to all peoples across Europe, including Jews. And you have the rise of nationalism, and here you have Otto von Bismarck. The First Reich, supposedly Charlemagne, and the Second Reich, Otto von Bismarck, and the Third Reich was Hitler. So you hear what was the Third Reich, and so the First Reich was Charlemagne, Charles Martel, Holy Roman Empire. The Second Reich is Otto von Bismarck, who unified the numerous states of Germany, and then the Third Reich is Hitler. And then you have anti-Semitism, and we discussed this quite a bit. The rise of anti-Semitism across Europe, and the comparisons between historical European anti-Semitism and Nazi anti-Semitism, combined with new racial understandings like evolution. Hitler's rise to power. The 1919, Hitler joins the German Worker Party. I believe he was actually sent there as a spy. You're supposed to look at them, and then he actually joins them. He takes control of a group, changes its name, and he discovers his great ability for public speaking. The Weimar Republic. the system that worked under. I say Jews did extremely well under the Weimar Republic. 31% of the wealthiest families in the Weimar Republic were Jews, even though we only represent 1% of the population. And then, as we mentioned in Kristallnacht was the 15th year anniversary of the Beer Hall Putsch, where people know their German history. And I believe 16 Nazis were killed, and then Hitler ends up going to prison. That eventually the Nazi Party starts coming in elections and getting seats. And here you can see by March 1933, they're the supermajority party. Or not supermajority, the plurality. In 1933, plurality. Hitler's appointed Chancellor of Germany. Reichstag fire. Nazis blame it on the communists. Somehow the parliament there gets put on fire, and the Nazis use that as an excuse to round up their enemies. Hindenburg, who had been the president at the time, gives the chancellor authority to have dictatorial power to crack down the communists that supposedly had lit the Reichstag on fire. So the Enabling Act, so here we're saying the rise, so the Hitler's rise through legitimate politics to basically becoming a dictator. The Enabling Act, March 23, 1933. Hitler wins chancellor in a legal fashion. Enabling Act was a special power allowed by the Weimar Constitution that gave the chancellor and his cabinet the power to pass laws by decree for a specified period of time without Reichstag involvement. It was only to be used at a time of emergency. Because it altered the Constitution, passing the Enabling Act required a two-thirds majority vote of the Reichstag. And so the Nazis, even though they were only plurality, were able to get this Enabling Act passed with two-thirds majority, which gave Hitler's government dictatorial powers for 4 years. You have the Night of Long Knives, 1934, destruction of Hitler's enemies, and then Hitler becomes Führer. Hindenburg dies. Hitler consolidates power by joining the offices of Chancellor and President and takes the title Führer. Just check the chat. Okay, so we got 15 people watching now. It's increased. This is pretty interesting. People know the World War II history. I'm not sure if there's anything interesting happening in the chat. Just check real quick. So I'll keep on going. This is interesting. I assume a lot of people know their World War II history. I'll keep going. So, what did the Nazis believe? Authority and order, emotion over reason, community rather than the individual, tradition, belief in the traditional family, nationalism, politics as a religion, and racial identity. Racial science, which I partially connected to evolution. Previously anti-Judaism had largely been religious, and here you have this racial science, different measures to determine who is part of the race. See like the different hair colors and complicated trying to understand what it meant to be Aryan or the different races and different skills and abilities of different races. The platform demanded a union of Germans to form a great Germany, abolition of the Treaty of Versailles, living space for surplus population, German blood is a requirement for citizenship, no Jew could be a citizen. Non-citizens in Germany is foreigners only, subject to the law of aliens, voting restrictions, have to live a life of decency, change in the educational system, taking over of the newspapers. The symbols, all widely familiar. Who are the key players? Anyone knows their world history probably knows these names. Pause this and look at this if you're more interested. You get the divisions, something we saw like in Bialystok, the stormtroopers, the protective guard, the security service, the Gestapo, the death head units, special action groups, the Waffen SS. The anti-Jewish aspects of the Nazi Party were basically always clear. So, as I said, that after the Napoleon and the Enlightenment, that Jews had been given full citizenship, and you had the large secularization. Up till then, almost all Jews had been traditional in the Orthodox sense, and after they're were emancipated and given full citizenship, we become largely secularized, and there's a decline in nationalism till Bismarck and the new rise in nationalism, and the questioning of who are these Jews that are considered equal in our land. So, the law of protection of German blood and German honor forbade either marriage or sexual relationship between Jews and Germans. So you have like German women being shamed for marrying Jewish men. Laws restricting personal rights, times you could go shopping, where you could go shopping, special, segregation benches. You got signs forbidding Jews from public pools. Forcing Jews to walk on the street, not being allowed to walk on the sidewalk. Special marks on the passport. Education restrictions. Occupation restrictions. Private property restrictions. And the boycott. 1933, the boycott of Jewish stores starts. Book burnings. We said historical examples that had happened throughout Europe. Nuremberg laws, 1935. Citizenship laws, protection of Germans' blood and honor. Restrictions on Jewish business, employing Germans, using German labor. And eventually, the who is a Jew question, in saying the Mischling, first degree, second degree, one Jewish grandparent, first degree Mischlings would be considered Jew if they met any of the following criteria: they practiced Jewish law or religion, were married to a Jew, or were children born after September 15th, 1935 to one Jewish parent and one German parent. The creation of the Hitler Youth, the re-education of the German people according to that. Took the membership level in millions. By 1936, there's already over 6 million members of the Hitler Youth. Education system changes. Nationalist education now, where they've completely taken over the education system. Changes in the curriculum. The teaching of racial science for biology. Or militarization in all aspects, like separation of the sexes, women, being more feminized and men being more militarized. Anti-Semitic literature, like the poisonous mushroom. Board games, anti-Semitic board games. And the teaching of racial ideology. Militarized sports. Boys are becoming more militarized. Media, they took control of the media. Films, documentaries, trying the ideal German. 1936, the Olympics are in Germany. Jesse Owens. gets the medal for the long jump. And then you get the violations of the Treaty of Versailles. 1936, the Rhineland. Germany takes over the Rhinelands. And then the Anschluss of Austria in 38. In Sutherland, 1938. Some more on the Rhineland falls, small territory that the French had, had been the buffer territory between France and Germany. So the Germans reconquer this buffer territory in the Rhineland. And then Austria. And rejoining the German-blooded people of those areas with larger Germany. Now that Austria has taken over, the anti-Semitism that has been legitimated in Germany now comes immediately to Austria. The Sudetenland. People know the European history. You probably know more about this. And then finally, Kristallnacht, 1938, that we had the whole slideshow presentation of. The first Jews sent to concentration camps, about 30,000. Okay, let me check the chat, and then we'll talk about Jewish immigration. Okay, so I'm just, I'm giving just a pure history here. I'm not sure if anyone wants to. Anyone in the chat really knows this history, wants to talk through some of these slides with me. I'm not moralizing here. I just want to know, what happened, basic history. So let's check the chat. This is important history. I hope a lot of people know this from like as a Jew, I was taught obviously a certain understanding of this history. If you're European or whatever, you might have had a different understanding. So let's continue. Jewish immigration. So as we said, about half of the Jews leave between 33 and 38. So, here you have the number, 39, almost 70,000 Jews leave Germany, 50,000 leave Austria, Czech Republic. And, they're seeing it's not looking good for Jews in that area. They've been getting out. 33 Jews already started leaving Germany, tens of thousands each year from 33. Before that, Jews all across Europe were trying to get into Germany because Germany was relatively the best place for Jews to be. You had full rights, citizenship, the ability to advance in society, and economically it was a powerhouse. So in 1933, Nazis come to power, and Jews start fleeing. A lot of Jews were pretty comfortable there. They were very successful. Didn't want to leave. The Evian Conference, 1938, and is really like till then, in Kristallnacht, but legally till the Evian Conference, Jews might have thought like it was going to be a reverse. For the first 5 years, feel like things are getting bad. The Nazis are putting some rules on, but relatively, they thought maybe that things might reverse or go back in their direction until the Evian Conference in 38, and a few months later, Kristallnacht. And actually, believe that a few of the people at the Evian Conference were even partially Jewish. And here you got some maps and numbers of where Jews left. You see 33,000 of the Jews, of the almost like 15-20% of the Jews who left went to Palestine. About half the Jews, America was the main place Jews wanted to go. And relatively, it was, the German Jews had an easier time getting into America than the Eastern European Jews. And Jews had been coming large amounts to America for a long time. You could see the huge amount. My ancestors partially were German Jews, came in the 1880s until the war restrictions, and then after the war. Kinder transport, people know about this, or like 10,000 Jewish children were taken into London. The St. Louis, which I believe went a few times, it's returned, and God forbid the people end up being rejected from America and sent back to their death. Widely known story. President Obama, talked about it. British owns Palestine at the time. This is a problem, but leading to the war between British and Palestine, that Germany possibly had wanted to push the Jews out and have them go to Israel, but the British control Palestine at the time, and they shut the door, and they don't want to cause problems with the Arabs by having so many Jews come there, and so they limit this immigration of Jews to not allow them to come to Palestine. People know their war history, the 1939 German-Soviet non-aggression pact, that and the outbreak of World War II, starting with the invasion of Poland. So Germany has peace deals with Britain, and they're just largely taking over territories that they had lost during World War I. And then all of a sudden they start annexing the invasion of Poland. September 1st, 1939, largely said that's the beginning of World War II. And that's going to be the biggest destruction of Jews, like we discussed with Bialystok. German invasion of Poland. Poland doesn't really put up any resistance. German takes over very easily. Here you got the kind of statistics. Like, there were a lot of Jews in Poland. So there was only like 500,000 Jews, a few 100,000 Jews in Austria, but there were millions of Jews in Poland. So when Germany takes over Poland, you look at some of these numbers. Warsaw, 350,000 Jews. Lodz, 200,000 Jews. Vilna, 55,000 Jews. Lvov, 100,000 Jews. Krakow, 56,000 Jews. And like tens of towns with tens of thousands of Jews in it. Blitzkrieg of Poland, over a few week period. And then the division of Poland, where Soviet Union reconquers some of Poland right away, in the administration division of how Germany is going to rule this new territory that they've just conquered. Germanization of Polish Gentiles. Poles with Aryan features were allowed to remain in Poland. Some Aryan-looking children were kidnapped and taken to Germany to be raised as German. Some Polish men were drafted into the German army. Others were deported to the Reich for slave labor. Monuments to Polish history and culture were destroyed. Valuable collections, art and science were transported out of the country. Museums and libraries demolished. Polish press and theater were closed. Polish cities and streets were renamed with German names. Universities and secondary schools were closed. Education after the fourth grade was forbidden, as Poles would need little education as slave laborers. Use of the Polish language in public life was forbidden. Two masters cannot exist side by side, and that is why all members of the Polish intelligentsia must be killed. That's from Hitler. Okay, so we get the Jews. So what happens to the Polish Jews? Beginning, just humiliation and terror. God forbid, people's payas and side locks being cut off and being debearded and just humiliated. Forced labor, expulsion, Jewish badge. Really, the Jews had no place to go. They were expelled, but they had no place to go. And eventually the creation of the ghettos, special sections in towns. There had been ghettos. We discussed that earlier. So, here's a map. Ghettos established 1939 to 41, 41 to 43, 44. So you can see the areas, from the yellow to the white to the black to geographically. More than 800 ghettos were established by the Nazis in Eastern Europe. And here we got some numbers. So let me check the chat again real quick. This is interesting history. Like I'm not sure how many people in the chat are watching this know much about World War II. So we're specifically more focused on the Holocaust and the Jews, although a lot of these events are related to larger World War II. So let's continue. So let's see some of these numbers. Jewish ghettos. Amsterdam, 100,000 people. Anyone who's ever been to like the red light district in Amsterdam, that was the former Jewish section. Bialystok, which we had discussed before. Budapest. So, the ghetto life, how do they run the ghetto? We talked about the Judenot. The Jewish people chosen to be the administrators of the ghettos. Forced in, just take whatever you can, bag your most valuable possessions, confiscation of property, forced labor, building the walls around the ghetto, hard time getting food. Jews still largely kept their way of life in the ghetto. Were gathered into these areas, and in Poland, most Jews were Orthodox. Maybe as many as 90% of the Jews in Poland at the time where the Germans conquered it were Orthodox, as opposed to like in Germany, the minority of the Jews in Germany had been Orthodox. So relatively, the Jews in Poland are pretty innocent, are relatively poor and uneducated, don't speak any language, have no way of communicating, and are living the traditional life that they'd been living for hundreds of years in the Polish area when Poland had been so good to the Jews, allowing us in and to build up our way of life. Conditions were really bad. It gets worse over years, starving, people smuggling, God forbid, ethnic Poles could be punished by death for helping out a Jew, forced labor, and eventual liquidation, resettlement into concentration camps. And this happens in each country the Germans take over. So we see, Denmark and Norway, lowlands, France, Great Britain. You got the invasion of Denmark and Norway in 1940. Norway, I heard stories that there are only like a handful of Jews. They even went like hundreds of miles to small like fishing towns to like round up a single Jew to have him killed. I've met the Chabad rabbi who's in Norway now. There's only a few hundred Jews there. There weren't many Jews there then either. Quisling, if people know their history, it's not in these slides, but the famous Norwegian politician Quisling, who conspired with the Nazis. In Finland, we got the lowland, Belgium, and Holland. The resistance was futile. At that point, the U.S. hadn't joined the war. There wasn't really any ability for those countries to fight against. Germany had built up an extremely powerful army. There was basically no ability to fight. In France at that point also, you hardly put up any resistance. Even if they had, very unlikely they would have been able to resist. And relatively, Hitler, Germany, that they had lost. France had put some damage historically, and that was one of the main targets that they wanted. You see that even wealthy, like Rothschild, the wineries, some were rounded up and killed. Even some of the most wealthy, prominent Jews in France suffered the same fate as everybody else. Division of French into multiple zones. A lot of the Jews are able to flee south and eventually make it to America. (1940) June 10th, Italy joins Germany in the Axis. Mussolini. Battle of Britain, July 10th, 1940. By air, Germany had much air supremacy, good technology, bombs. Start bombing the hell out of England. And then September 27th, Japan joins the Axis. So the tripartite pact of Germany, Italy, and Japan is in Japan starts conquering territories in the east, but we won't be discussing this much when we're talking about the Holocaust. And attack in the south, German starts going further south, Romania, Hungary, Yugoslavia. In the east, attacking everyone everywhere. Start attacking Russia. People know their World War II history. There's a lot of Jews in this area. We discussed in Bialystok, where temporarily had been conquered in 1939. Then the Russians reconquered, and then 1941, the Germans reconquer Bialystok. So a lot of the Soviet prisoners of war, Eizengruppen, going through and mass murder of people, bullets to the head, people being forced into the forest and digging their own graves. Buried in shallow graves, sometimes marched into the forest. One group killed, a small amount of dirt put over to them, and then the next group brought out, shot, and killed, and the same thing multiple times. And pictures of this, well documented. You can see videos of this. The Bialystok massacre in Mentor Bialystok. The Baba Yar massacre. 34,000 Jews killed in 2 days. And the pictures well documented. Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941, brings the U.S. into the war against Wannsee Conference, 1942, and the creation of the final solution. A little over halfway done with this. I'll check the chat again. Okay, keep on going. Okay, the Wannsee Conference, 1942, and the beginning of the Holocaust. 15 high-ranking Nazi officials discussed the final solution, and at that point, it hadn't been clear what was going to be done with the Jews. They wanted to drive them out of the territory, send them to Israel, or whatever, but it hadn't been planned to kill them until the Wannsee Conference in the beginning of 1942. You see the German record of the estimate number of Jews. Some people want like the 6 million figure. This is the German estimate of the number of Jews at the Wannsee Conference, and you can see 2,300,000 in this area, Poland, and So most of the people who died, like the Nazis who came to power in 1933, Kristallnacht in 1938, annexation of territory, God forbid, the murder through the Eisengrab group, and then it's not till 1942, in the next 3 years, the Holocaust comes into full effect. The cyclone B, carbon monoxide experiments, deportations, rounding people up. Auschwitz, main death camp. Arrival, selection, medical experiments, extermination, crematorium. Labor camps, prisoner of war camps, transit camps, and extermination camps. You can see most of the extermination camps are located in Poland. Buchenwald, Dachau, Bergen-Belsen. Estimated amount of people killed. Treblinka, close to 1 million. Auschwitz, well over 1 million. Belzec, almost 500,000. Map of Treblinka. Auschwitz. Auschwitz II, Birkenau. Confiscation of property. Tattoos, registration, shavings, delousing. The badges, different types of Jews, Jehovah's Witness, homosexuals, antisocials, and then the combined, where you got your Jewish antisocials, Jewish homosexuals, Jewish immigrants. Roll calls. God forbid, dead bodies all over the place, punishment for almost everything, death, food, starvation, daily's ration, breakfast, 2 cups of coffee or tea. By lunch, 3 cups turnip and potato soup, a scrap of meat or avo added. In the evening, a tiny piece of bread, tiny piece of sausage or cheese. Slave labor, BMW. God forbid, prisoner throw himself onto an electric fence, suicide. Medical experimentation, God forbid. And the gassings. Cyclone B. The crematoriums and the burning of the bodies. You see ring, shoes, gathered, gold fillings were taken out, silver fillings from teeth. Profit from slave labor. Resistance, obstacles to resistance. Resistance was basically futile. just to smuggle a little bit of food or to keep on teaching Judaism, to pray, was about all you could do to resist. Non-Jewish resistance, Germans felt bad what was happening to the Jews. We talked about the ghettos, the Bialystok people. Here you got mass execution of the Warsaw resistance fighters. And there actually relatively was quite a bit of Jewish resistance. You could see all the different places where Jews attempted to resist. But, at that point, the Nazi war machine was so built up that resistance was basically futile. The Warsaw Ghetto resistance, most famous one. And check the chat, and then we'll go to the end of the war. Okay. Final stages of the war. Allied invasion of Normandy in France in June 44. The Allies get into France. Once they get a foothold in France, they start slowly taking back territory and eventually take back Germany. My grandfather was a machine gunner for the U.S. My Scottish American grandfather, volunteered for World War II, and he would have been in the back of a U.S. airplane firing machine guns. Allies close in till the eventual defeat, closing in. The Russians are closing in at the same time the Americans are closing in. So, we're focused on the Holocaust here. So as Germany's losing control of the territory, they start having these forced death marches, abandoning territory, marching their prisoners from one to the other. Most people die during these. Few people are able to escape or shot. Germany already doesn't have much money left to even spend bullets. So the Russians force German people to look at the bodies of the killed people. A lot of Germans didn't necessarily they didn't know that the Holocaust was happening, and they forced the people to see what had been done. Liberation, eventually get into the camp, the liberation of Auschwitz. General Eisenhower's viewing the bodies, death camps, forcing German citizens to see what had been happening. Famous picture of Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin together. Hitler's last day before he commits suicide, fought largely till the end, until the fall of Berlin, and the complete surrender. And the Allied occupation, denazification, Jewish losses. So here they're estimating 5,600,000. So look at Poland, Soviet Union, Hungary, Romania, Lithuania. Displaced person. The Jews are going to lose the right to remain in Europe largely and need a place to go. Most of them are going to end up in Israel. Some make it to America or other places, but most of them remained in the detention camps until they're eventually allowed into Israel. Nuremberg trials. Defendants. Alfred Rosenberg, a mentioned philosopher, was hanged. Ribbentrop, hanged. Some of them 20 years in prison. Rudolf Hess, sentenced to death, confession. Rescuers, methods of rescue. People who helped out Jews across the, righteous Gentiles, according to, Israel. Famous diplomats. You got Wallenberg, Juni Sagihara. Governments that help Jews. And, list righteous among the nations that recognized by Israel, 23,000. Poland, the most. And a lot of these people did it at punishment of death on the spot. Netherlands. Americans. And, American the Holocaust. I got one last slideshow after this on what American the Holocaust. What did America know when they knew it? What did they do? The attempts of rising anti-Semitism, Nazi power to gain foothold in America. You get the Bund Report. Famous Jan Karski came to Roosevelt and reported that 1.8 million Jews had already been killed. The War Refugee Board. Could they have bombed Auschwitz? New York Times. Oh, that was a long one. So, got one last PowerPoint on America and the Holocaust. So, check the King Coughness. Have you read the Sefer Raziel Hamelech, and do you think it revealed to Adam? Same question with Sefer. It's possible. Like, I'm not sure. I mean, it's kind of off topic right now. I'm talking anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. Although, maybe you could esoteric understandings. So I got one last PowerPoint on the U.S. And I'm probably going to call it a night. This one's 100 slides. I'm going to try to go through this semi-quick. I'm getting tired. I've been talking for a few hours. Here, immigration. Me and Brundlefly were going over immigration recently. So you see that, 1917 Immigration Act, immigrations had to pass a series of reading and writing tests. Immigrants from Eastern Asia barred. 1921 Emergency Quota Act restricted number of immigrants to 357,000 per year, and also set a nationality quota of only 3% of the total populations of any overseas group already in the U.S. in 1910. 24 National Organs Act, Johnson-Reed, restricted number of immigrants to 164,000 per year, and reset the National Quota Act at only 2% of the population overseas group already in the U.S. in 1890. More than 50% of slots were allowed to immigrants from Great Britain and Ireland. And then 1929, the National Origins Act, and further restricted to a smaller, not 154,000. And in 1930, the LPC clause invoked. Jews were actually a higher percent of America then than they are today. During the war, Jews constituted 3.6% of the American population, less than we do today. You had the American Jewish Committee, founded in 1906, looking out for Jews worldwide. They'd been integral in a lot of activities, and we've seen more of the American Jewish Congress, founded in 1918 in order to help make a unified American Jewish position at the Paris Peace Conference. And possibly a lot of these people didn't really do too much or made serious mistakes. Rabbi Stephen Weiss, Felix Frankfurt, and U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis were among the founders. They formed the World Jewish Congress in 1936. Rabbi Weiss, 1914, co-founds the NAACP. People mentioned that, Jews' roles in multiculturalism. So this Rabbi Weiss is the one who helped found the NAACP in 1914. Joint Distribution Committee, 1914. Allocation of aid to Jews adversely affected by World War I. And they'll try to send money in benefit to help Jews in Germany. 1932, Roosevelt becomes president. Jews overwhelmingly support Roosevelt. And Roosevelt generally was considered to be anti-Germanic. So we talked about the Nazi boycott of Jewish businesses, and here we have the Jewish boycott, worldwide Jewish boycott of German goods. Protest rally in 1933 at Madison Square Garden. Rabbi Weiss, time for prudence and caution has passed. We must speak up like men. How can we ask our Christian friends to lift their voices and protest against the wrongs suffered by Jews if we keep silent? What is happening in Germany today may happen tomorrow in any other land on earth unless it is challenged and rebuked. It is not the German Jews who are being attacked, it is the Jews. And so a huge rally fills up Madison Square Garden to boycott Nazi Germany. And here you have the German response. Atrocity propaganda from abroad because of its Jewish campaign is constantly issuing official denials, but there are no programs and there's no. So we talked about the German boycott. So in response, the Nazis boycott the Jews. You get the book burnings we discussed earlier, and the Friends of New Germany tried to organize in America with Rudolf Hess. And they wanted the German American newspapers and associations to be pro-Nazi. The Havora Transfer Agreement. Nazis wanted to break up the German boycott of Jewish goods. Zionists wanted to rescue German Jews and bring them to Palestine. And therefore, it was actually Zionist Jews who broke the World Jewish Congress's boycott of Nazi Germany. It permitted Jews to leave Germany and take some of their assets in the form of new German goods. The German goods were purchased with frozen Jewish assets held in Germany. When the merchandise was sold, the sale proceeds were given to these immigrants minus commission for administration and a portion reserved for Zionist state-building projects. Transfer agreement rescued, they say, about 60,000 German Jews, of maybe close to 40,000 went to Palestine. And so part of the money confiscated from Jews during that time was given to Israel, and the founding of Israel is largely based on this Nazi blood money. It's a discussion for another time. A lot of these were discussed. In 1934, the Friends of the Nazis rally in Madison Square Garden. You can see videos of this. Nuremberg laws. 1936. Roosevelt eases up on rules for financial sponsorship. You get a tiny few more immigrants coming in. These are the rules to obtain a visa to come to America. You get the German-American Bund. The Olympics, neutral, boycott, allow. Roosevelt is neutral. (1938), a little bit more easy, in the only year where the quota for Jews was filled. So, some relatively, there were tens of thousands of Jews who were allowed to come to America during that time. Evian Conference, Kristallnacht, a protest rally against what happened in Germany and New York. In 1939, you got the Wagner-Rogers Bill, the admittance of 20,000 German refugee children under the age of 14. Senator Roger Wagner. It's opposed by 2/3 of the American public. Generally, they're not in big favor of accepting migrants, just like today. Should we accept refugees? So World War II also wasn't a lot of people who wanted to take in refugees. In 1939, another rally at Madison Square Garden proclaimed the right of white Gentiles, true patriots. Fritz Kuhn, stop Jewish domination of Christian Americans, protesting the Bolshevik Jewish American leadership. Video of that. St. Louis, we discussed. Here, the survey, when Brundle had done the ADL survey, so 1939, U.S. people, 32% think Jews have too much influence in business, 10% favor deporting Jews from America. So we got the Breckinridge Long obstructs immigration, preventing Jews from coming to America. Fear-mongering. Charles Lindbergh says that there's no danger. America's not in danger. There's no public interest in joining World War II. Emergency Rescue Committee. Jews are getting active. Roosevelt third term. Because of Breckinridge, long immigration is cut in America. 70% quotas. You could see that less than 10% of the allowable immigration was met. 1941, almost half. Breckinridge to 45. Very few immigrants are able to come over. Refugees. America didn't really want refugees then, just like today. Final solution starts happening. Roosevelt's declaration of war on Japan. The Bund Report, first report to America of the massacre of Jews. New York Times article. Rally at Madison Square Garden again. A lot of these rallies at Madison Square Garden protest Nazi atrocities. 20,000 people. B'nai B'rith. You get the Wagner telegram. More bad news. Stephen Weiss, the famous conservative rabbi, rises to national prominence. The Bergson Group, hoping to create a Jewish army to create the Jewish state in Israel. Obviously, the problem, the British control it. And most Americans don't really know what's happening in Germany or deny. Edward Murrow reports. Dorothy Thomas mobilized German Americans to speak out. Stop Hitler Now rally, March 1st, 43, Madison Square Garden. 11-point program, 75,000 people show up. We Will Never Die pageant in Chicago goes around the country. 100,000 people see this pageant. Jews sing Mass Kaddish. Bermuda Conference. 5-day conference, 1,500 people participate. Jan Karski, we mentioned earlier, meets FDR, hands over report. 1.8 million Jews in Poland have already been killed. 400 rabbis march on Washington. Rabbi Eliezer Silver reads the petition, and Roosevelt doesn't meet them at the advising of Rabbi Weiss. Video of that you can see. Hungary, Henry Morgenthau, Treasury. Morgenthau, I think, was a Jew. War Refugee Boards created. Another rally at Madison Square Garden, 44. More reports, the Auschwitz protocols. And finally, Allies landing in Normandy. Possibilities we discussed to bomb Auschwitz. Truman Directive gave preference to displaced persons for immigrant visas under existing U.S. immigration quota restrictions. While overall immigration did not increase, more displaced persons were admitted. You can see the immigration. 250,000 Jews were allowed into America between 33 and 45, which is a sizable amount, but obviously, the numbers speak for themselves. Okay. That's it. Anything interesting in the chat? And then I might call it a night. Wanted to get this out there, a little drab, not such, World War II, Holocaust review, European history, and rise of anti-Semitism. A lot of stuff out there. I'm not sure of any discussion. Okay, if not anything, I guess I'm gonna call it a night. Bye-bye. Hope it's useful information, and I want minimally to review for myself. Some important history. Maybe some of you studied World War II history or know quite a bit about it. I'd known, as a Jew, I'd been, knew about the Holocaust quite a bit. Although I might not stream Tuesday. I'm supposed to be on JF. I'm not sure what we're going to discuss, so I thought I'd do this just to get that information out there. There's a lot of stuff out there, but I just collect together some PowerPoints and go over it. And maybe Monday or Tuesday I'll do a preparation stream for JF. But besides that, I don't have any plan till then. Then we'll see how the JF stream goes. And I appreciate at least some people watching and get this information. This was kind of a depressing one, but get that information out there. The Ask the Rabbi in the three. So Holocaust is one of the biggest events in Jewish history and the most important things of being a Jew today. So just get that information out there. And I hope you enjoy the slide presentations. A lot of them I took, it's in the link from different Holocaust memorials. And I guess that's it. Shalom. Blessings. Hope for better things for everybody. This history is important, and you can learn from it how you want and take your own impressions. But history is important. Shouldn't repeat itself. Obviously for Jews this is extremely important, and for the whole world. Saying World War II, obviously everyone studies and the part of the Holocaust in that, and see what's happening today, and all these debates we're having about multiculturalism and nationalism and the JQ. This is important information, so I'm glad to put it out. There's already a lot of information out there. I don't have any unique scholarship. I'm not bringing anything new. I just collected together, different presentations from mostly Holocaust museums or university professors, and put it out there on my page. So thanks everybody. Bye bye. Shalom. Shua Tov. Blessings. Look forward to better things.